Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today we're talking about something that might be a little controversial, but I think it needs to be said. You've seen it everywhere, right? Start a side hustle. Make money while you sleep. Just drive for Uber on the weekends. The internet is flooded with this advice, and honestly, it's become the default answer to every financial struggle in America. Can't afford rent? Side hustle. Student loans crushing you? Side hustle. Want to save for retirement? You guessed it, side hustle. But here's what nobody's talking about. Side hustles aren't actually fixing our money problems. In fact, for most people, they're just a band-aid on a much bigger wound. And today, I'm going to break down exactly why that is. Let's start with how we got here. The side hustle has been romanticized like crazy over the past decade. Social media is full of success stories. People who turned their Etsy shop into a six-figure business, or someone who made $10,000 last month on affiliate marketing. And look, I'm not saying those stories aren't real. They are. But they're also the exception, not the rule. The reality is that most Americans who have a side hustle aren't doing it because they're passionate entrepreneurs chasing their dreams. They're doing it because they literally cannot make ends meet on their primary job alone. According to recent data, about 45% of American workers have a side hustle. And the average person with a side hustle is working an extra 13 hours per week on top of their full-time job. That's basically a part-time job disguised as entrepreneurship. We've normalized the idea that working 50, 60, even 70 hours a week is just what you need to do to survive in this country. And we've packaged it as empowerment, as hustle culture, as grinding. But let me ask you this. If people are working more than ever and still struggling financially, is the problem really that they're not working hard enough, or is it something else entirely? All right, let's get into the numbers, because this is where things get really frustrating. When you have a traditional W-2 job, your taxes are pretty straightforward. Your employer withholds federal income tax, Social Security, Medicare. All of that comes out before you even see your paycheck. But when you have a side hustle, congratulations, you're now self-employed. And that changes everything. First, you're paying self-employment tax, which is 15.3%. That covers Social Security and Medicare. Now with a regular job, your employer pays half of that. But when you're self-employed, you're paying the whole thing yourself. So right off the bat, before you even get to federal or state income taxes, 15.3% of your side hustle income is going to the government. Then you've got your regular income tax on top of that. And here's the kicker. A lot of people don't realize this until tax season rolls around. And suddenly they owe thousands of dollars they weren't expecting. Let's say you're making an extra $1,000 a month from your side hustle. That's $12,000 a year. Sounds great, right? But after self-employment tax and income tax, depending on your bracket, you might only be keeping $7,000 or $8,000 of that. And that's if you're tracking all your expenses correctly and taking every deduction you're entitled to, which most people aren't doing because they don't have time to become tax experts on top of everything else. Now let's talk about something that doesn't show up in a spreadsheet, your well-being. Working a full-time job plus a side hustle means you're constantly on. You're working during the week, working on weekends, working in the evenings. When do you rest? When do you see your family? When do you just live? Burnout is a real thing, and it has real consequences. It affects your physical health, your mental health, your relationships. And here's what's messed up. When you're burned out, you're actually less productive in both your main job and your side hustle. It becomes this vicious cycle. I've talked to so many people who started a side hustle full of energy and optimism, and within 6 months they're exhausted, resentful, and making barely enough to justify the time they're putting in. There's also this thing called decision fatigue. When you're constantly juggling multiple jobs, your brain is making hundreds of micro decisions every single day. Should I work on my side hustle tonight or spend time with my kids? Should I take that extra shift or finally get some sleep? That mental load is heavy and it takes a toll. And you know what the really sad part is? We blame ourselves. We think, if I just manage my time better, or if I just worked a little harder. But the truth is, humans weren't designed to operate like this. We need rest, we need downtime, we need lives outside of work. Here's a question I want you to ask yourself. What's your time actually worth? Let's break down a realistic scenario. Say you're driving for DoorDash or Uber Eats as your side hustle. You might make $20 an hour during peak times. Sounds decent, right? But now factor in gas, wear, and tear on your car, insurance, that self-employment tax we talked about, and the time you spend waiting between orders or driving to pick up food. When you account for all of that, your actual take-home might be closer to $10 or $12 an hour, maybe less. Now you're spending 10 to 15 hours a week doing this. That's time you could be using to sleep, to learn a new skill that could get you a better primary job, to apply for better positions, or honestly, just to decompress so you can perform better at your main job. The return on investment, especially when you factor in the non-financial costs like your health and relationships, often just doesn't add up. And this is true for a lot of popular side hustles, whether it's freelancing, reselling stuff online, doing gig work. Most people are making way less per hour than they think once you account for all the hidden costs and time spent. I'm not saying side hustles are never worth it. If you genuinely enjoy it, if it's building skills for a career change you want to make, or if it's truly supplemental income and not something you're relying on to survive, great. But for most people, it's not the financial solution it's marketed to be. So if side hustles aren't the answer, what is? Here's the uncomfortable truth. The problem isn't that Americans don't work hard enough. The problem is systemic. Wages haven't kept up with the cost of living. The minimum wage in this country is still $7.25 an hour federally, which is the same as it was in 2009. Meanwhile, rent has skyrocketed, healthcare is wildly expensive, education costs are out of control, and everyday expenses keep going up. We're told to budget better, to cut out lattes, to work more. But you can't budget your way out of not making enough money to cover basic necessities. The real solutions aren't sexy, and they're not quick. There are things like advocating for higher wages, better labor protections, affordable health care, accessible education, and stronger social safety nets. But those are big systemic changes that require collective action and political will. They're hard, they take time. So instead, we're sold this individualistic solution. Just work more, hustle harder, and you'll make it. And if you don't, well, that's on you for not grinding hard enough. It's easier to tell someone to get a side hustle than to address why a full-time job doesn't pay enough to live on in the first place. Look, I get it. When you're struggling financially, you do what you have to do. And if a side hustle is helping you get by right now, I'm not judging you. Do what you need to do. But I think we need to stop pretending that side hustles are the solution to America's money problem. They're not. They're a symptom of a much bigger issue. We deserve to be able to work one full-time job and afford to live. That shouldn't be a radical idea. So next time someone tells you to just start a side hustle, maybe ask them, why should we have to? Why isn't one job enough anymore? All right, that's it for today. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you have a side hustle? Has it been worth it for you? I'd love to hear your experiences. If you found this helpful, hit that like button and subscribe for more real talk about money. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.